Hi everyone, this is a Collaborate One session that we missed on yesterday because only one person turned up, and we agreed that I might just spend some time in a quiet and actually summarize the events that happened during the on-campus lecture rather than basically struggle with one student trying to unravel these concepts. Anyway, so we focused on the concept of literacy in our first on-campus lecture, and obviously this will not be a surprise for anyone because not only the entire unit focuses on the concept of literacy and then how um, the concept is to actually inform our literacy pedagogies, but it also is central to both assignments, assignment 1 and assignment 2. Assignment 1 may not look to you as actually talking to assignment 2, but in fact they are extremely interrelated. So if you actually don't work out how to think about literacy, which is the object of your teaching, or put it differently, the object of students' learning, if you don't actually work it out during the assignment 1, assignment 2 will suffer. So we're starting with the concept of literacy. I'll actually produce a very shortened version of what happened during our lecture, but I truly invite students, on-campus students, to actually write comments and participate on LearnLine in order to assist students off campus to clarify these terms better, just in case I miss things. So practically what happens very often, I get these so in the assignment 1 you have a number of assessment criteria and you will need to address them. So if you, for example, and this is a very important point, if you in terms of the structure of the assignment start talking about what is literacy, which is the first question of the assessment criteria, and you say something and it's well informed and all that, and then you go to the next assessment criterion, which asks you to actually discuss your literacy practices, which means actually to justify why do you see yourself as a literate person. I would expect that you would produce this response in an academic way, which means as an argument illustrating what makes you a literate person. We have come up with different examples. For example, we have created a scale. I'm not sure if I can draw at the same time as I can talk, but so imagine this is a scale, and if we interrupted it now with, so if it is a scale, it will have different markers, right? So it will have like a lower end and higher end of literacy, right? So people will be here and so on. So imagine that, for example, this would be, say, this level would be Z, which is really people who are at the high level of literacy capacities. But then you have people, oh my goodness, then you have people who actually are less advanced, right? So this would say that these are 0 people who have no literacy, but then you also will have people who have a little bit of literacy. So they will be here. And then you have people who have a little bit more literacy, so we call them B. So B is not as literate as Z, but B can and I can probably read the word what if you ask them to do that, or what is, or they might even be able to actually read the whole thing. So there are people, as you know, who can participate in their context of engagement quite well, but if you ask them to do something more sophisticated, um, they are not able to because they don't have those skills. So you can see that literacy is not just a one term for all. It will have to have the concept of literacy that you will be describing will have to have some criteria that will allow you to actually create or generate some sort of gradation between 0 and Z. So you will need to have some terms for distinguishing between 0 and Z, or A, B, and Z, right? So what did we do? We did all of this, and I might take you actually through the slides rather than through exact process how we actually got there in our class. So I'll just take you through the slides. So first of all, we were trying to actually work out how we would define literacy. And I use a particular structure that is used in business. If you want to focus your business, you need to actually do it in such a way that external people who are your target, actually they understand the pitch of your business. And that's not actually a simple thing to do. So they start typically saying so this is for whom it is, right? So literacy would be for people living in print culture societies, right? So that's what we write. For people living in print culture societies like Australia, for example, literacy. And let's have a look at if we started to think of literacy as a tool rather than a skill, because a skill is a little bit, we will see what skills need to be developed if you see literacy as a tool for engagement, right? So skill would be many skills, and literacy is a tool for engagement. So let's have a look. So if we're teaching our students literacy skills or literacy skills because they are living in a print culture. We live in a print culture, there's no doubt about it. So, and that's not to say that more traditional societies, like for example, Aboriginal societies, don't have actual literacy. That would be a total misrepresentation. Aboriginal people do have communication systems, whether it's painting or other signals they use. So every culture has communication systems. Every culture has a literacy system. One is no better than the other, but different systems do different things. So let's call it that we live in Australia in a print culture society, right? So literacy, if we thought of literacy as a tool, how would we now define it for our own purposes? So what we came up with during our lecture was as follows. For people living in print culture societies like Australia, literacy is a tool for engaging. And what do we engage? A diversity of meaning-making systems. And we're aware of it, right? Diversity, it's not just text. There will be different ways of working with text. So there will be different genres. There will be different frames of reference. There will be different modalities. So it will be painting, and it will be pictures, and it will be ornamentations, and it will be videos, and all of that, right? So a diversity of meaning-making systems, which is not just modalities, but also different ways of working with text and structuring text and organize and different frames of reference, which are relevant for a particular genre, but not relevant for another. So it's a literacy. So literacy is a tool for engaging a diversity of meaning-making systems. And why do we do that? To participate in the context of life. Context of life is a term that I borrow from philosopher Wittgenstein, and I'm not the only one doing this. There's a reason. People in semiotics, which is a study of meaning, do that. So I just basically give you what's in research. So engaging different meaning-making systems, but why do we do it? Well, typically in a classroom or school situation, it's a very abstract exercise, and it's usually to satisfy the teacher, but that's actually wrong pedagogy. So you will be seeing how I will be actually framing the entire unit, ELA 200. I'll be framing it in a way so that as a teacher, you will not be teaching literacy, or at least I will expect you that you actually understand that literacy was invented for a reason, and I hope you watch those lectures in the YouTube videos in module 1, where where people actually discuss the origins of literacy. we're not there at the end of it. So it might have started with paintings and with smoke and all of those things. Today we have a print culture. God knows where it will end up. So it's a progress and it's a process. What today for us in the 21st century may seem like, right, we've got it. It's just only a process. It's no different than clay tablets. That's where we are. It's a kind of one of the steps on the way, but works for us. And we know that the systems we have, the different um, types of literacy we have, because we've invented them for the needs of a society. So you cannot teach reading away from the context of engagement, because you then don't enable children to make a link between a particular meaning making system and its relevance to the context of life. If you don't make that system, then you teach it as an abstract, as irrelevant, and children just you lose them. All right, and the idea also is to participate, right? People want to participate on an increasingly informed basis. This is very important, so that people actually use those diverse meaning making systems, not only what people say communicate, but actually to do it increasingly better. So that's why we have those videos. That's why we have a web. That's why we have books still. That's why we have newspapers. We have so many expressions of literacy skills, so that we could, in more than one way, access and work with information so that we grow bigger heads. That's the idea. The idea is not to use it. The idea is actually to grow. So literacy is not to be used, but to be used in order to support expansion. Very important. We lose it too. These three elements here, this, and that, I will want to see as foundational, not just in your assignments, but also in the way you will be making an argument showing me what makes you a literate person. If you say me, I'm literate because I answer email, well, so can my mother. So can I in French. That doesn't make me highly literate person in French. I can basically put together three words and just say, moi je veux bien, right? I am doing well. Oh, well, really. But if you put a joke in front of me in French, or something more sophisticated, or if you ask me actually to produce this lecture, which I'm doing now, I'm Polish, but if you ask me to produce, and I left Poland, I finished German studies in Poland. I left Poland when I was 22. But if you ask me today to produce this lecture in Polish, I couldn't, because I don't have those abstract terms and the fluency with working with abstract terms in Polish. But I have it in German, because I studied also German pedagogy in German. So I've got it in German. I don't have it in Polish. So there you go. You can see that just because my mom spoke Polish, and so did I for 22 years, doesn't make me literate in enough of contexts of life to actually make me professionally capable in my first tongue, what you might call it first language. All right. So we've got these three elements, and they're here, highly highlighted. Actually, now this one looks better, because literacy is not used, but it's used in order to support expansion. And these things will be very important in your own argumentation about what makes you a literate person. Well, I am, I have a Facebook, and I talk to people, to my friends, on how expansive is that. Well, I learned that they had spaghetti this morning, or they had an argument with a boyfriend. Well, they're very good. I find these things very important, because the closest circle is very important to our emotional stability. But that's not the only direction of our expansion. We need to actually identify categories that support our expansion, and why friends are important. There are other ways in which we actually can use literacy context or literacy meaning making systems, so context of engagement of literacy, whereby we actually support ourselves in our professional, emotional, social life. And you will see that it's not that simple. So anyway, so just to summarize where we are, diversity of meaning-making systems, this is what I just said. Progress is important. You need to illustrate how your, so in for assignment 1, how the kinds of contexts of life in which you participate actually support your progress. So I'll give you some categories here. But before I move to categories, I'll just show you the results of this beautiful experiment. I've got the paper as well, but this was reported in this particular session, Mind and Machine, the Future of Thinking. And what they reported in this particular colloquium during the World Science Festival, which is every year happens in New York. Look at this here. They took a person who has, they call it net naive, have never been on the internet, right? They have no idea how to search internet and so on. So they did a brain scan of a net naive person around 60 years of age as the person was reading a book, a text. And look at this, what fired in the brain. Sort of some areas quite good, isn't it? So some imagination happened and so frontal cortex, some sort of organization and interpretation. Here memory and reconstruction areas, and God knows what these other things are, I can't remember, but a lot of emotional work and so on, quite good. Now they took a person who was net savvy and they made the brain scan of this person when that person was reading the same text. By the way, in research, they always take people who are the same age, the same education, background, and all of that, so that these variables will not actually interfere. And what do we have? A little bit more at this level here, so connection between frontal cortex and hippocampus, which is about how you construct stories, but more or less the same, but less activity here. But look what happened on the internet. When they put a net naive person, the person who's never done searches on the internet, has no idea how the internet works, they put them on the internet, you can see that this person, when they work with the internet, the brain scan looked for the internet looked the same pretty much as for the text. Which means that this person, or the interpretation of this research, is that this person, that naive person, saw a web page as a text. But if you actually look at the net savvy person, they didn't see a page as a text. Look at this. This is more than a double of activity in the brain. I would claim it's basically reflecting how they actually have, this scan, in my view, basically reflects the map they have of the net in their brain, and all these things are getting activated because for a net savvy person, a web page is not a web page, it's a series of clues of where else you can go to find information, right? So a net savvy person has a pretty good understanding that you can do more than just read a text, right? So the text is not the text. It's clues, it's opportunities, it's creativity, it's where else can I go, what I can do with it, right? So look at this, how many actually neurons are firing as a net savvy person is actually looking at the internet. Now, for this lecture, in this lecture, I'm basically setting up a framework for our work through the semester. And I'm inserting this picture here on purpose because what I will be actually teaching you is how to support this type of learning, right? And what I will be doing is to teach you, to show you ways in which you can actually facilitate this kind of brain activity in your students, because and you can see that if a person is reading, a net savvy person is looking at the web page, what they look at is at exploratory opportunities. So they know that net means resources, and it also means exploration of those resources. So resources and explorations are the two things that a net savvy person knows internet represents, right? So exploration and resources. I might actually write it down for some people who might need to actually see it in writing. because we all think differently, right? We all organize information differently. So exploration, remember, so do kids, so do the kids. Exploration and resources equals the internet. So if the internet, which is exploration and resources, generates this kind of activity, that's what we want in our classroom, and that's what I will be showing you throughout this semester of how to make it possible so that kids can utilize as many brain skills and neurons as possible so that we can actually make use, and especially in the early childhood context, but not only, make use from the billions and billions of neurons they have before they actually start losing them, because the brain goes all the time on a regular basis through pruning. It also generates new cells, but we will never have as many cells, neurons in our brain as we do when we are born. And by the time we are 7, our brain is pretty much solidified now, right? So what happens is, by the age of 7, uh, a lot of this good work that I will be teaching you to do actually will be showing results. So if you facilitate creativity and critical thinking and all other skills, by the age of 7, they will be pretty much there. While a lot of people think, oh no, we're gonna do them when children are 15, 16. It's all over. By the age of 7, the game is over. So shows neuroscience. And also other tests in psychology have shown that um, by the age of 7, children pretty much know who they are, what they are capable of doing, what threatens them, what they can't do, and so on. So they have self-efficacy concepts already, right? So basically, the job of an early childhood teacher is extremely important. We make them or we break them. The idea that we can just leave it for high school or for middle school is not on. It's actually wrong. Then the middle school teacher and the high school teacher works with the bricks or with the building blocks that we have actually made uh, possible for children to develop. So now, if we want this kind of concept of support this concept of literacy, so first in terms of the assignment one, if it is about diversity of meaning system, contexts of life, and in order to actually progress, we ask ourselves in the on-campus lecture, what criteria could we use, or do we know of, that will allow us to actually judge or gauge whether we are using diversity of meaning making systems, whether we are engaging different contexts of life, and whether we do it in order to actually progress as human beings at every level of our participation in the society. So we didn't know, of course, because many of us are thinking that, well, nobody gave us a syllabus for life, right? Is there a curriculum for life? And what I suggested, that actually there might have not been, but educators have been thinking, and not always in a good way, I agree, but at least the terms are good, have been thinking about giving students and giving people some sort of categories for thinking whether they actually are able to engage diversity of meaning systems, are able to engage increasing amounts of context of life, so you don't always do the same thing. When I was 20, I was watching this show on television, and when I'm 50, I'm doing the same thing, right? Well, great, but that doesn't make you necessarily, I mean, it doesn't increase your chances of being a person that actually can be a leader in your context. Because a leader has to actually have a broader perspective, broader vision. You have to have a vision, and you don't develop a vision of how to be in the world and therefore how to support others if you continue to do the same thing. That's kind of an illness. It's like a dog running. Some dogs catch their tail first time because they run in circles and they think, what's that thing behind me? They catch it once and it's all over. They never do it again. Some dogs do this game all their lives. Everyday surprise, what's that thing behind them? Anyway, so we looked at these concepts, and I'm a little bit hurrying. Of course, in the class we had yesterday, we went through the process of trying to work out what is out there for us to use. But we can. So if you, for example, in your assignment 1, if you actually come up with a definition of literacy, and then you want with a definition of literacy, and have a look how this maybe definition of literacy is or is not reflected in textbooks or other resources I have given you to study. Once you produce, and remember, a good grade is always in the detail. The more text you engage, the more critically you work with them to show, whether the limitations and the opportunities the texts have, the higher the mark. If you just give me a definition that came from your own head, that's likely to be a fail, right? Because we're here to actually reflect engagement in the unit, not reflect what you knew and know, and as a result don't need this unit for. I will be assessing your participation in ELA 200. I don't assess your knowledge. So you are enrolled in ELA 200 to actually make through ELA 200, not in order to do something else. So anyway, the devil is in the details. I will be looking at how many texts you read and how many arguments you have actually engaged and how you worked with them to reflect limitations and opportunities in different perspectives that people give on literacy. But then when you actually are trying to tell me how you actually, whether you are a literate person, and the criteria that you would want, I advise you strongly that you use to reflect between different types of literacy levels, the one that is here, that can do some things, can do more things, and here. I suggest, you could use arguments that draw on documents which are already out there, and they are quite good. I'll just see whether this looks better this way. No. All right. So if we look, for example, at the concept of graduate attributes, what is it that we have here? We have, of course, academic knowledge. People want you to have some academic knowledge. They want you to be also an ethical citizen, which means person who has what in general capabilities is called a person who has ethical intercultural awareness. And also they want you to have entrepreneurial spirit. And what does this mean? It doesn't mean necessarily go out there and make money, but what it means is a person who can, what in general capabilities is actually considered, has those social skills, right, and personal capabilities. And what it is actually being self-aware, confident, knowing your limitations, knowing how to work with them, knowing how to use them to your benefit, linking with people, doing teamwork, networking, all of these things, right? So when you tell me you are a literate person in the assignment, and these are your example, I talk on Facebook, well, that's lovely, but none of that is actually an argument. What I would like you to position your examples of what makes you such a good literate person and show what you can do and what you are not doing. Because I'm more interested not in you telling me how good you are, but you showing me what categories you use for distinguishing between more or less literate people. And I am very interested in you actually using these concepts, for example, of graduate attributes. So to what extent, if you are on Facebook, to what extent are you using Facebook to actually develop your critical thinking skills and problem solving skills, for example? Let's start it here. Well, how can you do it through Facebook if you only talk to 5 people who love you? Why is it that some people have 2,000 people on Facebook and people say, well, that is unrealistic, they're not their friends? Of course they're not their friends. Of course. You are not my friends and I talk to you. Right? Not every person in your life that you encounter is the person with whom you can spend a holiday. But we need people because they are mirrors. They tell us about ourselves, and we also work with these people. So you can use, actually, Facebook has lots of things, not just Facebook, social media have lots of things, but not only social media. There are particular spaces out there in your community where you can go and volunteer and learn how life looks like. I was a foreigner when I came to Australia, and yet I know pretty well how Australian self-governance and Australian communities work because I've been out there. I've done voluntary work. I've done things in business council, with businesses, with NGOs. I did with federal government, local governments. I don't know, lots of things I've done. I've done projects, and they still there on the internet, like a community events calendar, and all of this are created for people to, I've done things to actually facilitate communities' lives because I identified needs and I had the possibilities to actually create things on the internet that help them to actually manage their lives better. Point is, there's a lot of things out there, and all I'm asking you is to think now in terms of critical thinking and problem solving things. How do you use those social media? How do you use your resources around you? Not necessarily what they call bosom friends, right? But sort of like your colleague, like a person you hate, but you can see that that person actually has qualities. So what you need to do is develop professional attitude to people, which is like you don't have to love everyone, but you do need to work with a lot of people, and everybody is different. And it would be nice if you could actually show this attitude that as a literate person, you have a pretty good understanding that life is not about loving everyone from the perspective of they have to be like me, but it is about loving everyone from the perspective of I understand we're all different. So we have a number of skills here. So Facebook, as you know, just talking about Facebook as an example, you don't have to milk it, but I'm just milking it because I can. Just as an example, they have different interest groups, interest pages. Those interest pages, other than celebrity pages, they have different news, alternative news, in professional groups. They all gather with one another in order to disseminate information, to actually meet one another, and to run actually initiatives through them. And when you participate in these things, even just by lurking, you actually get a pretty good understanding what's happening around in those things. So creativity and innovation, how do you use your community resources and your literacy resources in order to actually show me that you are progressing, or you are using them in the way that supports you to participate on an increasingly informed basis, right? So what kind of things you do? Social responsibility and cultural global environmental awareness. Oh, and you would say, well, I'm only 20, or I'm only 30, or I'm just a growing mother or something, right? No, break it down, think reflectively a little bit about what you do really, and try to show me how you actually, and what you will be showing me, just to remind you, you'll be showing me what kind of different meaning making systems you use in order to reflect that you are socially responsible, and you do it in such a way that actually enables you to engage in a reflective way, so that from a particular engagement I can see that if you do it longer, or because you have so many links there, you have a chance to actually expand, right? It's not that complicated, but it is a reflective assignment. It's not, because then what I'm showing you, what we're learning, is actually thinking of literacy in terms of its value to the person who's going to live in our culture, and thinking about it through different categories, so that we are creating an expansive picture of what's being literate, what it means to be a literate person. Now for children, so graduate attributes then are helping you to actually assess not only your own involvement, but also how is children's involvement actually addressed in schools, because one of the assignments questions is also, if you were to have a look at practices of teaching literacy, whether from your past, how you were taught literacy skills, or maybe how it is done nowadays in schools from your own observations. You've got these sort of categories here to assess what is happening. And when you assess all of those, I'll show you, you don't just talk about lifelong learning or critical thinking. I mean, you talk about this category, but you can actually refer now also to the outcomes in general capabilities. Have a look at general capabilities and see how your participation in literacy and refers to graduate attribute skills, refers to general capabilities, and also these concepts here, which I will explain in another lecture. At this very moment, I'm just flagging them. But you can see, once you have hooks like this, your story about your participation or assessing actually current pedagogies of literacy that you have seen, witnessed, now you can actually talk about it because you have hooks. You can talk, from this perspective, in relation to this concept, in relation to this capability, right? You can actually create a story rather than give me three examples of how you can actually talk to your friends on Facebook and how you can send an email. I mean, that's not an answer. That's my mother can do it. Doesn't make, even in English she could do it. And it doesn't make her literate in English. It just shows that some things she can do, but she's not actually um, at the level that she could say she actually consciously creates strategies in order to actually progress in the way she actually lives in an English culture, because my mother doesn't live here, she lives in Poland. So that's the idea. What kinds of things do you, what kinds of contexts of life do you engage that enable you to use many meaning, different meaning making systems so that you actually can assure that your life is moving forward. Your intellectual, social, emotional life and creative life is moving forward. That's the question. Now, I have created this map. Why am I creating these maps? I'm creating these maps for you because these will be frameworks for our unit. Not just for your assignment 1 and 2, but because they are frameworks. This is a framework that we will be using not just for ELA 200, but also for your assignments. Obviously, they are related. Assignments are testing your engagement in ELA 200, therefore I have created some sort of map that we will be using, not in this lecture because I wouldn't want you to die afterwards with so much information, but basically this map will show what kinds of terms we will be using to address the concept of literacy, and also as a tool for our own engagement in life, and also as a tool for supporting our students' engagement in the context of life, right? So you know that there are cross-curricular priorities. So I have mentioned them above, and I'll bring them once again here. Right, so they are engagement with Asia, sustainability. Sustainability is meant, you can check it, quite a broad concept, and also knowledge of indigenous cultures and engaging the knowledges. So these are cross-curricular priorities, but then we have capabilities. Then each capability, we can have, so for in the curriculum we have capabilities, we also have capabilities, and 21st century skills are very much matching together. They're really just different ways of framing the same sort of concerns. We will be talking also in ELA 200 about social, educational, and symbolic capital in relation to each of those capabilities and graduate attributes, because they again allow us to break them down. So they allow us to break down these capabilities and also to look at the outcomes integrated under each capability in a way which is a little bit more helpful, because when we talk about social education, we will look at the outcomes for a particular capability and we'll say which ones actually we can engage in order to enhance students' educational capital, symbolic capital, and social capital, right? So we will just do that. Educational and symbolic capital. So social, education, and symbolic capital. And I wish I could spell, but thank God nowadays this is how it works. So okay, now I don't have to explain it today, as I said, but this is the kind of map we will be following in the course of our unit, and we will be learning how to work with it, so that our resources that we create for students and the kind of exploratory opportunities that we will be creating for our students, and then framing them and discussing them in assignment 2, that they actually have follow a particular map, So we're not floating around and then so that we don't have surprises. That a person will give me an assignment, say in Jolly Phonics, and I will write this was not a unit in Jolly Phonics, and it is not a unit in Jolly Phonics or in Abracadabra or in any sort of methodology that is out there and packaged and sent to people. This is an intellectual unit, an academic unit that teaches us how to work creatively and critically with the curriculum. That's the unit. Okay, so we have a map, no surprises here, and we will be learning how to actually work with these concepts throughout the unit. I have just, for your own information, I just put some text about a summary about those capabilities. You see that I here just have joined them together here. This is just for your sort of information, just so that you can have a quick overview what they are about. But please do consult the curriculum and have a look what they discuss so that we can actually work with these. So that's just about it for today. Hopefully I will attach the lecture and I will attach the link on YouTube and also the entire PowerPoint so that you can actually review the PowerPoint for yourself at your own pace. Thank you very much.